As you see from the title, this is palette knife painting week, in my second attempt. Gotta say, I'm rather pleased with it. Let's rewind the clock. Welcome back to the studio, and as you see, my second attempt at using a palette knife to do a whole painting. Now, this really is much more of a how I did it rather than how you should do it technique painting. But I think you'll see from what I'm doing that there's lots of little tips and tricks that you can pick up along the way. I certainly did a little bit of studying beforehand, and I watched a few other tutorials from other YouTubers far more experienced at using a palette knife. Richard Musgrave Evans in particular, so inspirational, wonderful sort of spirit of painting, lots of energy, and I tried to incorporate a little bit of that in my own painting. And the first thing I want to do though is drop in that horizon line, and I suppose it's probably towards the sort of top third of my painting here. So roughly, if you divide that up into thirds, there's 1/3 there and another 2/3 there. So let's just do this by eye. So I'm going to literally just gives you a sort of a little bit of sort of sense of proportion of where to position things. So here you see this is about another third down, so somewhere through here. And it comes quite a long way across, doesn't it? I'm going to sort of stop it around about there. And this is just this big, long rock shelf. There looks like another rock back in there in the distance. And there's this another big rock here. A little bit left of centre here, so not perfectly centre. So figure out where your centre is and come a little left of it. And it's somewhere in this middle third, isn't it? So left of centre, middle third, somewhere kind of in there. Now, it doesn't get much easier than that, really, does it? So let's choose some colours. Well, again, keep this as simple as possible. Try and keep a lid on that paint box because you don't want every colour in your paint box on the palette. You'll get confused. Break it down into some simple, sort of basic colours. A blue for a sky, a nice dark green for the sea, some brown for the rocks. Now, the other thing I'm going to be doing is, of course, painting this all with palette knives. And I got just a few here to choose from. Got quite a selection. It's funny, you know, for somebody who hardly ever has painted with a palette knife as an exercise, I've managed to amass a huge amount. Most of these have just been given to me by people, so they kind of gravitate towards you. And I'm going to sort of pick something fairly sort of stout and robust to do this sky. On my palette, I've put out some phthalo blue and some titanium white. Let's take a nice slug of titanium white and put a little phthalo blue there. And let's just blend this together. And I want strong blue going to pale. I'm going to go to almost completely to white. So there's my gradation of colours. So you don't have to worry about mixing one particular colour. So let's start off with just getting some of this nice light colour onto the painting, and I'll fix that runny phthalo green in a second. Got a whole ton of beautiful, beautiful colours happening there. I want this to be a brighter colour in here. Now look at that, that's just absolutely breathtaking, isn't it? But if I mess with it too much, I am going to lose so much. So I am not going to mess about with that. Now, you can see here that what happened is I went over this a little bit too much and I lost my bright spot. It's so easy to do, isn't it? Just to kind of just one too many times across that area and just kind of lose that bright spot in your painting. Okay, I think I might just leave my sky alone for the time being, and let that paint kind of sort of stiffen up a little bit so that I can go across it without lifting it all off, because when you paint with a palette knife you do have to have patience. If you go over it, if you go over this one more time, then you'll end up lifting off a ton of the lovely detail that's on here. but I want to block in some of the watery areas next, which if you look at the reference photograph again, I'll pop it up in the corner there, you'll see it's like a lovely dark green colour. So I'm not going to bother wiping my palette knife. I'm going to go straight into some black and some phthalo green, and instantly you get that lovely deep green colour. Gosh, now that's a transparent sort of green tone here, and I can add a little sap green into it as well. Look at that for a wonderful colour. My goodness, that's breathtaking. It's so good, it's going right on my painting. So that's where I've got with my painting so far, and I just want to draw your attention to this area here. If you look at this reference photograph, you see there's a ton of spray and the rock and that there. So I really don't want to go sort of hampering myself too much by having a lot of very heavy, thick paint there. So I sort of let my paint run out a little bit. I just took my palette knife, and in essence what it is, I literally just scraped off some of the excess paint and just sort of applied it in there and just rubbed it into the canvas. So it's just the merest skim of colour on there. And I'm going to put in the rock next. So I'm going to underpaint this with a dark brown colour. If you look very carefully at the reference photograph, you can see there's an awful lot of dark shadows in there, and it's a dark brown or a black colour in fact. So I'm going to put some of that in next. So I'm going to just kind of work around, and the wave part here, I'm going to get to that in a minute. So I've got some black and some Van Dyke brown. I had a bit of a tidy up on here just to sort of push things out the way a little bit. Black Van Dyke brown, a good strong dark charcoaly sort of colour, and as I mentioned, I'm just literally going to just block in the position of that. I'm just using this small flat blade. I'm just going to literally just press that down into the canvas. Again, I think kind of maybe that I use probably not as much paint as some palette knife artists would use. I tend to use a little bit and just kind of really press it down into the canvas and really kind of make a nice dark stain without going too sort of crazy with the paint. Maybe it's because I'm mean with paint, I don't know. But I kind of figured that once I actually get it on to the canvas and I've actually got the stain of colour on there, that I actually don't need to go too mad with it. Yeah, just one of those things. I think naturally we think, oh, palette knife painting up, that'll be using up all my paint in one go. And I'm really starting off with just the same amount of paint I would be if I were starting a regular brush type oil painting. I suppose the other thing to consider, of course, is that when you wash your brushes at the end of a nice day's painting, you don't really see how much paint you're actually washing away, because it goes in the thinners bucket and you never really see it, do you? It's sort of gone. So I'm just having a quick look at my reference picture. So it's sort of gone into the thinners bucket. You never really see it, you never really can quantify it, but you would be shocked if you thought about how much paint never even made it to your painting. Whereas with a palette knife, what you pick up all goes on your painting, none of it gets wasted. So just going to push these into here. So you see when I'm scraping my palette knife across this canvas, every tiny drop of paint that was put out is on my painting. Very little of it goes to waste. So maybe palette knife painting isn't quite as kind of messy or wasteful as I think we might think it is. Something to think about, isn't it? That if you're put off by wasting paint doing something like this. And the other valuable lesson I learnt really was that I would rather use my paint to learn to paint and to do something than to find a tube of paint that's gone hard, sitting in the drawer, unused. That's not worth anything to anybody, is it? Whereas now, the paint that I've just used has got value. So don't be too miserly with your paint. You know, use it for the intended purpose. Don't try and save it for a rainy day. They don't exist. That's basically what I think I'm trying to say. Those rainy day paintings, yeah, never get to them. Just put it on a painting and enjoy the process and be creative with it. And for the sake of maybe a few pounds or a few dollars, look at the enjoyment value. I don't enjoy it sitting in a tube. So that's that area there. I'm going to just put in a little bit more of the sort of surfy areas in here, maybe a little bit more green. And I'm going to start working on some ochre down here for a beach. Out the way. I've got some dark sienna and some yellow ochre here for the beach area. Again, I'm just going to basically just knife mix this together and just work this through here. Now, I want some of this blue colour reflected down here in the water. On the beach rather, so I want to maybe think about leaving a few gaps in here again, but this is, I'm going to just really spread this on really nice and thin because I can get some fabulous sort of beach kind of detail on the beach here. Look at that, just, isn't that smashing? You sort of really kind of get almost sort of a lovely sort of wet beach effect just by smearing the paint around. This is incredibly fun to do. How it all began, so a little bit of a backstory to that. Terry was the one, my other half, she was the one that wanted to start painting like Bob. And she'd been watching Bob on public broadcast service in the UK, a PBS channel. Forget the name of the channel, and she'd been watching Bob for quite some time, very keen on what he was doing and a lot of fun, and you kind of keep half an ear out for gift ideas because Christmas was on the horizon. I heard Terry was sort of getting into the art thing. I thought, great, I'll buy some paint. So I nipped out during my lunch break from work, went to a local art store and bought a box of paint, just a box of paint, half dozen colours. Didn't realise it didn't come with a palette knife, and that Christmas Terry was so excited with her paint. She was so excited, but she didn't have a palette knife. So I went out into the garden and I got a piece of plastic. I forget what it was from, some tin or some pot, and I fashioned her very first palette knife out of a piece of plastic, and she painted her first miniature Bob Ross because they were only tiny. She did her first miniature Bob Ross paintings that were jewel-like. They were so beautiful. Little miniature Bob Ross paintings on little bits of canvas paper that came in the kit. It was, and she sat and painted for days with that little broken piece of plastic from a pot or something that I fashioned for her. So the moral of the story is you don't need anything too expensive. This I think was probably just maybe £2 or £3. So something cheap and cheerful. Just to have some fun with. Now look at that, as I've been yakking away there to you, look at this amazing beach that I've created here. So there's the opening part of my painting. A very quick step really. I think if you sort of hold up the reference photograph and sort of just imagine that spray is all this area through here, and this dark brown area is this big rock through here, you can see how my painting starts to form up quite quickly. The process of using a palette knife to create a painting can be quite energetic and quite fast, and that's something I really enjoy. That's just getting some paint on there. Now, my painting is going to sit overnight now. I just want this to try and firm up just a tiny little bit because I know if I try and come across here with some big clouds, it's probably going to get a bit muddy a bit too quick. So I'm going to leave my painting to sit just overnight, and I'm going to come back in and start working on the sky and try and refine things a little bit more. This is definitely a painting that takes maybe a day or two to complete. So join me in about 24 hours, which for you will be just a split second. It has become tacky and dry. The rocky areas here still quite wet. Let's have a look at this sky now. Now there's an awful lot going on in this sky, and one question I always ask myself is, how much of this do I need to make a nice painting? Do I need all of these elements? Could I just put in one or two of these elements and get the same effect? And I think that's the case here. There's a very striking band of cloud going through here. There's a lot of dark cloud here. I mean, it's very, very busy. And I think sometimes we could just sort of simplify things, take some of the elements of this sky and put it into our painting. So that's what I'm going to try and do next. And take some of that blue-grey mixture here, and notice how loosely I've mixed that. I really haven't overworked that too much. And again, there's this really lovely sort of streak of colour going through the sky here. A little darker up here in the corner. Again, I'm just going to let the paint sort of break through here. I'm not going to overwork this. And it gets a little darker on the two ends. Just going to let my knife down. So because this sky is a little on the dry side now, it means I can actually run the knife across here without picking up a lot of mud. A little of this colour here. And there's some nice sort of underlighting coming through here under this cloud. Again, and I'm just going to drop that in, push a little bit of that up. We can get almost kind of chained to one part of our painting to the point where we can't let go, and it's not the central feature. This is the backdrop. So I think we try and get the wave in next with that rock there, and then obviously the big bunch of spray popping up. So there's a little touch of something happening in the background there. Now I've got some little touch of the dirty white colour, little touch of phthalo blue. There we go. And I'm just going to take literally just a little hair of that on the edge of my. So I am just going to literally suggest that in. Again, I'm not going to work on that too hard. And I'm sort of using my reference. I can see some nice greens coming there, but I can also see some sort of nice blue-grey tones coming through there as well, and a little bit of the original dark of the sea. So I'm just going to drag this through. Obviously, it looks like there's a sort of a bit of a wave happening there. So just drag the knife in, and just sort of drop the handle down. Once again, I don't know if I'm going to do the best wave in the world here, but I'm doing my best. So it doesn't really matter if you're using a palette knife or whether you're using a brush. Your skills, the things that you've been learning to do with a brush, stand you in good stead with whatever you're painting with. Now I just want to try and push in some of that foam. Just use the tip of my knife there. Now don't worry if this gets a little muddy looking, it's okay. I'll come back and fiddle with that in a minute. But this is where you find out that you've got lots of skills, lots of observational skills. Just looking how that water just kind of comes crashing through there, kicks back up. And so I know I'm picking up a little bit of brown through there, it's okay. And if I pick up a little green or I pick up a little brown, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. There's a lot of spray up in here. I've just got a little bit of white. And again, I'm going to let that sort of smudge in. I'm letting the canvas take off what it wants. You see how you can run it over there. That amazing sort of energy you get without having to try terribly hard. Let's push that little bit of shadow in there. Well, I've been painting away now for about maybe 45 minutes on the seascape part of this, and one thing I haven't done yet is to take a proper stand away from my painting. But I'm loving this sort of lovely sort of energy here. You can almost hear that wave smacking into the back of that rock. I put some lavender tones in there, so I put some alizarin crimson with some phthalo blue, and if you look at the reference picture, you can see there's a warm lavenderish kind of tone in there, which I wanted to try and get into my painting as well. And I like that blue colour from the sky, so I've brought some of that through there now. That'll probably get a little bit more foam painted across the top of it, but I think if I stand back, I can start to see how my painting is starting to form. Once you start getting a few of these key elements in, like this wave here and some nice shadow coming through on this rock, and you start piecing it together, it's a bit like a jigsaw puzzle. You start with sort of the thread, and you start sort of following it and unraveling the painting as you go, and each piece of the jigsaw sort of fits into place. But I do need to stand away from my painting and have a good look at it from the other side of the room to make sure that I'm somewhere close to being on track with it. But at first glance, I think I'm pretty good. So my painting's really moved on quite a bit, and I'm starting to see now how the shape of a wave is starting to form. When I stood back, I start to sort of see how the water lays between these rocks. But I think I need to come back and do something with the headlands next. So that's going to be something I have to attend to. Now, the other thing to point out is that this is still really in sort of the rough stage. I haven't really tried to refine anything. I'm going to leave this to sit overnight so that I can come back in with my palette knife and maybe just sort of finesse a few of these edges. But I love the energy of my painting. It really sort of jumps off the canvas. I can almost hear the crash of that wave. I'll start work on the rocks next, and then maybe I'll try and get some beach put in before I finish painting today. Sit tight, it's all getting very exciting. For the life of me, I've sat and really scrutinised this, and I can see something happening in the background of my painting, probably more so on this side, but I got to confess, I can't really see a headland. I think it's more of a big dark cloud over there, but I fancy something like a headland, and I can see the end of a big rock sticking out here, so I'm going to try doing a headland in the background in the distance. The one thing to remember about things that are far away is they tend to be quite pale in value, so I'm going to take some of my dark sienna. I should have put out some Van Dyke brown, shouldn't I? Never mind. Maybe I'll put out a little touch of black, and then some blue. I want this to be sort of a very sort of muted colour, nothing too bright. You can mute it down a little bit more, putting in some blue. Anytime you put sort of a blue colour into anything like this, a pale blue colour, it tends to mute the colours down. It tends to really knock the saturation out. I think it sort of tends to grey them a little bit more. So I'm sort of thinking about having something in the distance there that's sort of more to the grey side of things a little bit more. Here we go. And as I say, it's really much more of a suggestion of a little bit of distant headland. I might put a little bit of highlight across it, and it's sitting right on the edge of the sea. This feels like it sort of should be closer, so I'm going to make this a little darker, a little bigger, a little bit more detail. So that one's nice and distant. A little bit of yellow ochre down there on the edge of that rock. Put a little bit of that in. Needs to be a bit brighter. You're on a winner. And if it doesn't, well, you can always take it off again. It's the beauty of painting. As Bob was very keen to tell us all the time, it's your world. Let's mix up some colour and see if I can work on these rocks next. Now, you see in that quick little sequence there, I put on just a small amount of highlight on here, kept looking back at my reference picture, made sure I wasn't losing all my shadow here. This looks a bit of a pickle. I may have to do a little bit more work separating out some of these rocks. It looks a bit all over the place. And I started working on adding rocks in here. Now, one thing I should have done probably a little more is to show you my palette. Sometimes, now this is a trick I picked up, sometimes it's fun to actually use a shadow colour, which isn't what you would expect it to be. The temptation is just to put black in there, but it's kind of a flat colour, whereas I can make myself a really dark lavender colour, a deep sort of purple colour with some crimson, and it looks, at first glance, you'd see that how deep that colour is. It looks almost as deep as the black, and you can put in a shadow colour that doesn't immediately strike you as being the right colour, but you can use a dark tone like purple or lavender, and it adds a sense of sort of depth of colour to your painting, which straight black just doesn't give you. And I put on a couple of little strikes of colours through there to sort of show this is sort of like layers of rock. And I'm going to touch this with a few little highlights in a minute. And one of the little highlights I need to make is an orange colour, and for that orange colour I'm going to be using Indian yellow and red. Now, I know from experience mixing these two colours up that they make the most fiery, earthy, orangey tones that I think is what I can see in my rocks. So let's have a stab at that. You can see there's a touch of white into it. Don't know. Looks a little bit too yellow now. I don't know. What do you think? I think it has that eye-catching colour that I'm looking for. Doesn't it? Has that real pop of colour leaping up off the canvas that I think I like. And once again, you see, by not over mixing my paint, that when I touch the painting, the paint breaks apart and produces these amazing tones that I think are impossible to reproduce. If you're using a brush, you can't get that. It does too good a job at mixing things up. Whereas with a palette knife, I think you can get some amazing colours that just feel left out, won't it? Again, don't kill all the darks off. That's the one thing you can't do. Is as soon as you fill it all in and kill off those darks, you're in big trouble. Now, in the reference photograph, the water curls right around this rock, and this is all water here, choppy, churning water, and I've decided I'm going to go for a beach in here instead, just so I can do some fun reflections. But I do need to get around the corner of this rock here, so I've still got my colours from earlier on, some nice sort of greys and some blues and some green colours in here, so I'm going to just literally make that turn around the rock there. Again, a lot of churning water here, so I'm just going to work this in and take it sort of around the end of the rock. And I put some green through in here, so I'm hoping that some of this is going to sort of pick up on those green tones. Now, obviously, it looks very much as though it's strongly lit from the side here, so I'm hoping sort of some of the water is going to catch a few of those sparkles of light in here. And so I want this to look like it's sort of got a nice shadow under it, onto a nice beach. So I'm going to just let my paint run out a little bit in some of these areas. Going to put a little bit of water through there. There we go. Now the beach area down in here, I applied this a couple of hours ago, and it's already started to tack quite nicely. So it'll mean it'll take some more paint shortly. I won't be fighting over too much paint. There we go. Look at that. Created a whole new feature there in my painting. I quite like those angles. They look quite good, don't they? There you go. Right, let's move on to the beach. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not convinced about this. I don't know if it works or not for me personally. I'm sort of betwixt and between, and this is the problem here, where, you know, if you give it a reference photograph and you stick to it, you kind of got your map, and then you start going sort of off piece, doing your own thing, and it can sometimes just go, nah, doesn't quite work. But that's part of painting, isn't it? Just having some fun with it. Now, one thing I do want to do is I want to reflect some of my rock colours. I think this colour here would be kind of reflected down in the sand. I'm just going to pull some of that down. Maybe this is what I need. Maybe this is what's missing. It's sort of, maybe this is the missing element. Now, look at it, that one comes that way. You got to. I just think just pull some colours onto the beach. Now the problem is, you can hear some of you sort of gnashing your teeth and saying, but there isn't. And the answer is, there is now. Do you see? You see, if you put something in that doesn't quite fit with what's happening above it, then just fix it. You know, just move the colours around a little bit. There's a bright splash of colour here that isn't up here, so let's add that little bright splash of colour here. You see, so. Okay folks, I'm on my feet now. I'm running backwards and forwards from the other side of the studio backwards, and I'm standing back, and I'm adding little bits of colour in here. I'm adding little bits of surf here, and taking my painting off. I've extended the rocks down a little bit further. So it's just a case of going backwards and forwards now. I brought some water over the top, and I made it look like it's running down the edge of the rocks there. I just wanted to break up this big slab of colour. This is a bit of a chunk through here, and what I would really want to do is sort of bring that water through there and kind of change it. But you can keep changing and changing and changing. And I think I've taken this painting to the limit now, what I can do with it. I've added splashes and crashes, and I sort of smoothed off little bits of paint that are a bit on the thick side. It's a bit bothering me, that chunk of white paint through there. I can just smear it off. Look at that. You can just kind of come back, and that's been up there for a couple of days bothering me. So there you go, I fixed it. It's sometimes you just have to just look at that. That does not quite look right. But I think I have to call it time on this little painting. For my number 2, my second only ever palette knife painting, I'm pretty pleased with this. And yeah, I think it's time to call it quits and look for a new subject, because I'm getting to the stage now where I think I could just overwork this to the point where I lose a lot of these fun little details that I've picked up, that I've learnt, that I've played with. I could just overdo it now. So time to stop. So there you have it, from a reference photograph to a finished painting by a complete novice with a palette knife. But don't move, because there's some more lovely videos for you to watch, including my very first attempt at palette knife painting a street scene. That was fun too. Happy painting, people. Oh, and don't forget, if you've enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. It all helps to build my little channel. Thank you.